question that pops up often is, how do I get my ideas for painting? How do I come up with a composition? What is this secret? It's something that I have never really given much thought to, but today I'm going to unpack it for you, and I hope it will give you some helpful tools to address these aspects. I will also be painting some autumn watercolour leaves and telling you how I went about doing that, so let's get into it. I'm not too sure about this drawing. Let me move it so you can see it better. I have been doing several sketches and I'm not too sure about any of them, so I think I'll just have to stick with one. So I think I'll just have to make up my mind and start, otherwise I will never get started. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting started, and then maybe you might be surprised and you might get a result that you like. Not knowing what to paint, lacking ideas, can also lead to a dip in our inspiration, and worst case scenario to art block, which is really annoying and frustrating. There are so many ways to overcome that, by the way, and the first two that come to mind is to change one of your art supplies, like your paper, your paintbrush, or to veer towards colours you wouldn't usually use. Or get started on a painting even when you don't really feel like it, because the process of painting will feed your inspiration and it will come back to life. It's like sometimes you discover you were thirsty only when you start drinking. Recently, for example, I have been sketching less in my art creations journal, which I use for rough ideas. I almost filled it completely over the summer as I worked in it constantly, and I found myself feeling a sense of depression creep through me. The moment I picked it back up, it eased that ugly feeling. So there's that, and it's a big thing that goes without saying. Don't underestimate how powerful sketchbooks can be, especially the ones you reserve for your raw work, which usually involves a little less pressure. And these sketchbooks can become, over time, a treasure trove for all kinds of ideas and concepts that you can then translate into your art and painting. Ideas. The way I come up with ideas is very often an image will pop up in my mind randomly at random moments, and then I will try to find reference images that can somehow guide me in bringing it out onto paper. So very often it's a matter of image research, which today is so easy to do with all the platforms out there. What you see me painting today is actually the mashup of at least 5 or 6 different reference images I researched on Pinterest. I tend to use reference images very loosely. I don't look for a likeness in them. That is not my purpose, unless I am painting a commissioned portrait, of course. This also helps me make my work feel more mine, if you know what I mean. What pushes you to paint or make art in general? I think that is a question that a lot of people don't ask themselves, and I think that pinning down the answer to that question will define your end goal more clearly, and that will automatically put you on the right path to coming up with more ideas that inspire you and make you want to paint. For example, I have come to realise over time that for me, that answer falls into 2 categories, according to how I am feeling. Either I want to paint an emotion as a personal outlet for that emotion, or it goes all the way back to beautiful illustrated storybooks from my childhood. So more towards storytelling. So flipping through those books will immediately give me ideas, the sense of movement, the idea of something happening in the painting, an element that makes me wonder, where's it coming from? Where's it going? What's the story behind it? So what is your push? What drives you to make art? You might think right now you have no clue or that there's nothing. But there's always something, and if you ask yourself that question long enough, one day the answer will just magically pop up and everything will be clearer and more ideas will start flowing. let's jump into composition. There are composition rules out there like the golden ratio and using a pencil to divide your paper or canvas into 3 vertical and horizontal sections and placing the elements in the intersections between the lines. That's where the lines meet, basically. I have a video about that on this channel, so you will find more in-depth information about that in that specific video. If I knew how to use Photoshop, I most definitely would use reference images and play with them, moving them around the screen to see how they work better together. But I don't know how to use Photoshop very well. So my method is much more traditional, and it consists of having my drawings on transparent tracing paper cut out individually, like stickers almost, and moving them around my paper to see where they sit better, how the different elements interact more harmoniously and more effectively together. I think that is a super helpful thing to do if you are feeling stuck, and I also find it to be quite fun. I then store these images in the pocket at the back of my sketchbooks, and I can pull them out and use them time and time again, because I do tend to paint quite a lot of similar subjects like owls and in this case, yeah, an owl, but quite often also rabbits. Okay, we're mid-stage point, I would say. Since I want to make the leaves really stand out, I'm going to keep the face light. And I know that I can go into the face and darken the skin up if I want to later on. I really want the autumn or fall leaves to stand out, so I know I'm going to use all these oranges and golden colours and browns, and that is going to stand out against the eyes. I still haven't gone in to put like the final touches in the eyes. It took me forever to paint the eyes. There's so many layers in the eyes. I don't know if you can tell, probably not. And one thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently is that sometimes I read these titles on YouTube videos where they say they've painted these paintings in like 10 minutes or 40 minutes, and they look really complex to me. It takes me much longer to paint a piece, much longer. And that is something that I would like to I can't wrap my head around how you can paint something so complex in half an hour or, I don't know, 40 minutes. Maybe they use more paint in their mixture. Maybe they're more pigment heavy, which is something I should try and do, because I would really love to go sit down just for half an hour, paint something and move on. Because it can get you can get detached from a painting if you stick at it too long. At least that is my experience. It's not quite getting autumn here in Rome. The leaves at the very top of that tree are starting to turn yellow, but it's still quite warm, and I think we'll start seeing some changes in the foliage quite soon. So I'm a little bit worried about going into these fall autumn leaves because this is hot press paper, and I know how watercolor behaves on hot press paper. It tends to sit on the surface of the paper a little bit more than on cold press paper, and is a little bit less manageable, as well as taking less layers. I've said that in previous videos, so sorry if I've repeated myself. I don't know what's going to happen. I would know how to behave if this were cold press paper, but I do not think that I've ever painted leaves on hot press paper that is this smooth. I've definitely painted it on Bao Hong hot press paper. Let's have a look. Let's see if I can find that sketchbook again. So here are my leaves on the Bao Hong hot press paper sketchbook, but the paper that's inside these Bao Hong sketchbooks, which are like this, is a little bit more textured than the paper you get inside the Etcher sketchbook, so it was a little bit easier. I think I will try and keep it simple to avoid, any mistakes that might be irreversible. I think I'm going to try one leaf and see how it goes, and then I'm going to take it from there. So, of course, yeah, I could go for a wash all over and then build up upon that, which might not be too bad of an idea, actually, now that I think of it. I keep contradicting myself, I know. Should I or should I not? Maybe I should. I was about to pick up this super thick 1-inch brush, 1 inch, it looks bigger than 1 inch, brush by Escoda, which is something that I really fancied and then didn't even really end up using, and it's synthetic. This is 100% synthetic. Would you believe it? It's wonderful. But I think this is definitely not the kind of brush you would want to use on 220 GSM paper, which is this. It will hold a lot of water. You definitely want to use it on paper that is at least 300 GSM, so thicker than this one, otherwise it will buckle. And I'm probably going to use this brush, which definitely holds water, but not as much. And I think this is a synthetic brush as well. Not 100% sure, but I think it is. So I'll be going in with a very watery wash of yellow ochre and then a little bit more of an orangey tone. You can see it's super, super watery. This is a so-called tea consistency. And I'm going to be spreading it around the leaf area just to give myself a foundation to build up upon.
Stars come to shine when it's dark from so far away and show us where we are. It really makes me wonder. Yeah, it makes me wonder. Ooh, I wonder. Ooh, I just wonder.
Getting dark and the artificial light is starting to shine off the paper, which is something that I hate when the days start getting shorter, that if I want to paint a little bit in the afternoon, later in the afternoon, I get that effect of light bouncing off my paper. But anyway, either it's no painting or it's painting like this. And what I've decided to do is just kind of wing it and work wet and wet, dropping some pinks, some browns, some oranges, some ochres around these leaves, and just praying it goes well, just keeping my fingers crossed. And if you have watched this far, I think you might be interested in joining my Patreon community. I host live and recorded sessions, sketching and painting several times a month. And I also have narrated tutorials and behind the scenes over there. Plus the most amazing bunch of international people from all over the world. So if you want some art buddies too, that's where you will find them. I will leave all the information in the description box below this video. That's where everything is happening. Looking at it again, I think it's quite cute, quite nice to look at. I really like the fact that the leaves are so soft, that everything's so soft. So I hope I won't push it too far and make it look less soft and atmospheric than it is. But I have to go a little bit more deep. So what I was doing here, I was working wet and wet, as I said, on the leaves, and I just allowed these very soft colors like yellows, and I used Madder Lake red light, I used some rose doré, I also used yellow ochre, of course, and I used some browns and violets as well in these mixes. The thing that I did is that I used them very watery, so you can see that it's very soft, as I said. And also I went in a little bit thicker in some of the edges of the leaves. And one thing you should do, a mistake that I was about to make over here, is the lighter leaves should not have the darker ones overlapping them, because the darker ones usually are darker, at least in this case, because they're like in the background. So the lighter leaves, the lighter ones in color, would be on top of the darker ones. And as I go on, the leaves that we will be able to see only partially, maybe like over here, because there's not enough room left to have full leaves, and also because they're lying under the ones that are shown on top, will be darker, and of course we will be able to see only part of them. And that will create depth, making those last leaves darker. And then we can go in and add some details on the leaves that are on the surface, like in the veins of the leaves, by using a very small brush and with a mixture that is a little bit thicker. I wouldn't say buttery, because that would end up making the lines look too thick and distracting. So that is how I'm going to proceed. So it's the next day. It takes me a long time to paint. I don't know if I will have said this in my voiceover, but I consider myself to be a slow painter. And that is mainly because the reason why I fell in love with watercolor was because of its transparency. So I do thin layer, thin watery layer upon thin watery layer. And that takes a lot of time. And then obviously I do build up to a consistency that's more that's thicker to get into the details, but it's a very gradual process. You can decide to paint with more paint in your mixtures and less water, and that way you will get the results faster, but you will be losing some of the transparency of watercolor. So it's really up to you how much you love the transparency of watercolor, its translucency, and how much you want to preserve that. And if you do love that, then you kind of do have to paint in thin layers with little pigment, and then, you know, reinforce it a little bit at the end. And I was really happy with how this painting turned out, so winging it worked well. I hope the video was useful, that you enjoyed it, and I will see you all next Sunday. Bye for now.